It was a bitter October evening when the Harper family arrived at Ravenswood, an old mansion inherited from a distant relative they had never met. The sprawling estate, nestled deep in the woods, seemed almost alive with its creaking timbers and overgrown gardens. The mansion's Gothic architecture, with its towering spires and shadowed windows, cast an imposing figure against the dim, cloudy sky. Emma Harper, the mother, was a historian, drawn to the house by its mysterious past. Her husband, Tom, was a practical man who preferred modern comforts over old-world charm. Their teenage daughter, Lily, and young son, Max, were both intrigued by the prospect of a grand adventure. The first night in Ravenswood was uneventful. The family settled into their respective rooms, exploring the mansion's expansive interior, filled with dust-covered furniture and cobwebbed corners. As the wind howled outside, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. It was during the second night that the disturbances began. Lily, who had always been sensitive to her surroundings, reported hearing whispers in the dark, though her parents dismissed them as figments of her imagination. Max, too, started having nightmares of shadowy figures lurking in the hallways. Tom, while skeptical, began to feel an unease that he couldn't quite explain. Strange occurrences grew more frequent, doors creaking open by themselves, the sound of footsteps echoing through empty rooms, and cold spots that seemed to follow them. Emma, determined to uncover the mansion's secrets, began researching the house's history. What she discovered was a chilling account of Ravenswood's past. In the early 1900s, the mansion was owned by a man named Nathaniel Blackwood, a reclusive figure rumored to dabble in the occult. He was said to have vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a series of unsettling journals filled with cryptic writings and strange symbols. According to local legend, his disappearance was linked to the dark forces he had invoked. As Emma delved deeper into the history of Ravenswood, the disturbances grew more intense. One evening, while researching in the library, she found an old journal hidden behind a false wall in one of the bookshelves. The journal, belonging to Nathaniel Blackwood, detailed rituals and incantations meant to summon entities from another realm. The more Emma read, the more she felt an oppressive presence in the house. Lily's nightmares became more vivid, and Max began talking to an imaginary friend named the Shadow, who seemed to be telling him to do dangerous things. The family's once bonded spirit began to fracture as fear took hold. Tom tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but even he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. One stormy night, the tension reached a breaking point. Emma, determined to confront whatever was haunting them, performed a ritual described in Blackwood's journal in the mansion's old cellar. She hoped to break any lingering ties to the supernatural. As she chanted the incantations, the temperature plummeted and shadows danced menacingly around her. Suddenly, the cellar door slammed shut, trapping Emma inside. Her screams echoed through the mansion, but no one was able to reach her. Tom and the children frantically searched for a way to free her, but the house seemed to be working against them. When Emma finally emerged, she was visibly shaken, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. She explained that during the ritual, she had seen a vision of Nathaniel Blackwood, who had warned her that the entity he had summoned was still bound to the house. The final days at Ravenswood were a descent into horror. The entity, now fully awakened, manifested with increasing violence. The family found themselves plagued by nightmarish visions and physical attacks. Shadows moved with a life of their own, and an icy, malevolent presence seemed to follow them wherever they went. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, the mansion seemed to come alive with the entity's wrath. The walls groaned and shifted, and the house's interior twisted into a labyrinth of darkness. Tom, Emma, Lily, and Max were separated by the shifting corridors, each experiencing their own personal nightmare. Lily found herself trapped in her room, facing the shadowy figure she had seen in her nightmares. The entity, now fully corporeal, was a horrifying amalgamation of darkness and despair, with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. Lily fought to stay awake, knowing that sleep would mean falling into its grasp. Max, meanwhile, was lured into the cellar by the entity, which promised to release him from the fear it had inflicted. As he ventured deeper into the darkness, the shadows seemed to close in, whispering promises of safety that grew more sinister. Emma and Tom, battling their own fears, raced to find their children. The house seemed determined to keep them apart, with walls that shifted and doors that led to nowhere. The tension reached a fever pitch as they finally reunited, only to find themselves face to face with the entity. In a final, desperate act, Emma used the knowledge from Blackwood's journal to perform a banishment ritual. As she chanted the incantations, the mansion trembled, and the entity screamed in rage. The walls seemed to bleed shadows, but Emma's determination held strong. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, and the oppressive presence in Ravenswood dissipated. The mansion, though still ominous, was now eerily silent. The Harper family, exhausted and scarred by their ordeal, made their way out of the house, leaving behind the horrors that had plagued them. The mansion of Ravenswood stood as a dark monument to the unknown, its secrets buried in shadows and whispers. The Harpers never spoke of their experience again, but the memory of their time in Ravenswood lingered, a haunting reminder of the terror that lay within its walls. Years later, Ravenswood remained abandoned, a dark silhouette against the horizon. Locals whispered of strange occurrences and eerie sightings, but no one dared to venture near. The house stood as a chilling testament to the horrors that had transpired, its shadow forever cast over the town of Ravenswood. The Harper family moved on, forever changed by their experience. They carried with them the scars of their encounter and the memory of the entity that had haunted them, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. Dr. Alice Thompson had always been fascinated by the obscure and macabre. When she received a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to research Ravenscroft Estate, she couldn't resist. The estate, a decrepit mansion with a history of unexplained phenomena, had recently come into her possession through an unexpected inheritance. As the family arrived at Ravenscroft Estate, they were struck by the mansion's imposing Gothic architecture. The manor's dark, ivy-clad exterior loomed against the misty backdrop, its broken windows and sagging roof hinting at years of decay. The first night at the estate was marked by an oppressive silence. The mansion's interior, though grand, was filled with dust and cobwebs. Alice eagerly began her research, exploring the hidden nooks and crannies of the house, while James set about inspecting the structural integrity of the building. Emily and Sam, though intrigued by the mansion, felt an unsettling chill in the air. As darkness fell, strange noises began to emanate from the mansion's upper floors. The creaking of the old wooden floors and the whispering winds seemed to conspire against their peace. Emily, who had always been sensitive to her surroundings, reported hearing faint whispers and seeing fleeting shadows, but her family dismissed them as the product of an overactive imagination. Alice's research revealed Ravenscroft Estate had been the home of the Ravenscroft family, who were rumored to have engaged in dark rituals and occult practices. The estate had been abandoned for decades after a series of tragic and unexplained deaths. The most chilling account involved the disappearance of the estate's last resident, Lydia Ravenscroft, who vanished without a trace one stormy night. Alice uncovered an old journal belonging to Lydia. The journal contained cryptic entries about a hidden presence that had haunted her family for years. The entries spoke of unsettling visions and mysterious occurrences that had plagued the Ravenscrofts. As the days passed, the disturbances grew more intense. Objects began to move on their own and cold spots appeared throughout the mansion. The whispers Emily had heard became more distinct, forming fragmented phrases that seemed to call out for help. One night, as the family slept, Sam was awakened by a strange sensation. He followed the whispers to a hidden room behind a false wall in the library. The room contained old, faded photographs of the Ravenscroft family and strange symbols etched into the walls. A feeling of dread enveloped him as he realized that the room was somehow connected to the estate's dark past. The atmosphere in Ravenscroft Estate grew increasingly oppressive. The family began to experience vivid nightmares, and their daily routines were disrupted by inexplicable events. Emily, who had been the most sensitive to the supernatural, started seeing ghostly figures and hearing voices that seemed to be pleading for release. One evening, as Alice explored the manor's old cellar, she discovered a hidden chamber filled with ritualistic items and occult symbols. Among the artifacts was a worn book bound in what appeared to be human skin. The book detailed a ritual intended to summon and bind a dark entity, and Alice realized that the Ravenscrofts had likely performed this ritual, unintentionally inviting a malevolent force into their home. As the entity's influence grew stronger, the family faced increasingly terrifying experiences. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the whispers became more insistent, filling the mansion with an air of malevolence. Emily was particularly affected, as the entity seemed to be drawn to her. She reported seeing a dark figure watching her from the corners of her vision, and her health began to deteriorate as fear and anxiety took their toll. Determined to confront the entity, Alice and James began to research ways to banish it. Their search led them to ancient texts and local legends that spoke of a powerful exorcism ritual. They prepared for the ritual with the utmost care, gathering the necessary items and preparing the mansion's grand hall for the confrontation. As they began the ritual, the entity's presence became palpable. The mansion seemed to come alive with an oppressive energy. The walls trembled, and a cold wind swept through the halls. The entity manifested in a horrifying form, a writhing mass of shadows and torment. Emily, who had been plagued by the entity's influence, was drawn into the grand hall. The entity seemed to focus its attention on her, feeding off her fear and despair. Alice and James struggled to maintain their composure as they recited the incantations from the ancient texts. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The ritual reached a climax as the entity's form became increasingly unstable. The air grew colder, and the shadows twisted into grotesque shapes. In a desperate bid to banish the entity, Alice and James poured all their strength and willpower into the ritual. The entity screamed and howled, its form distorting and writhing as it was pulled back into the darkness. With the entity banished, the oppressive atmosphere of Ravenscroft Estate lifted. The family, exhausted and emotionally drained, took time to recover from their ordeal. The mansion, though still eerie, no longer held the same sense of malevolence. The whispers had faded, and the shadows no longer moved with a sinister intent. Alice completed her research, documenting their experiences and the history of Ravenscroft Estate. The mansion was slowly restored to a state of peace and tranquility. The hidden chamber was sealed, and the occult artifacts were safely removed and stored. The Harrington family decided to stay at the estate, having faced and overcome a profound evil. Their experience left them forever changed, but they found solace in their resilience and the strength of their family bond. Epilogue. Years later, Ravenscroft Estate stood as a testament to the family's courage and determination. The mansion's dark past had been confronted, and its legacy was now one of survival and strength. The story of Ravenscroft Estate became a legend in the surrounding area, a tale of horror and hope that would be told for generations to come. Rebecca Caldwell had always sought stories that pushed the boundaries of reality, but nothing could have prepared her for the inheritance she received: Blackwood Manor. The grand but crumbling estate had been left to her by a distant relative whose name was rarely spoken in the family. The family arrived at Blackwood Manor on a dreary autumn afternoon. The mansion's Gothic architecture loomed against the overcast sky, its once majestic facade now marred by years of neglect. The surrounding forest was dense and foreboding, with fog curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. As the family explored their new home, they were struck by its eerie atmosphere. Dust-covered furniture and rotting wallpaper hinted at the grandeur of a bygone era. The mansion's vast empty rooms seemed to echo with the whispers of its past inhabitants. Rebecca began to investigate the estate's history, finding old letters and documents hidden in the library. These writings spoke of strange occurrences and the mysterious disappearance of previous owners. Despite the unsettling nature of the discovery, Rebecca's journalistic instincts urged her to delve deeper into the manor's secrets. As days passed, the Caldwell family began to experience unsettling phenomena. Objects in the manor moved on their own, and strange noises echoed through the halls at night. David, though skeptical, could not deny the inexplicable occurrences. He attributed them to the house's age and shifting foundations, but his unease grew. Anna, with her artistic eye, noticed peculiar details about the manor. She began to sketch unsettling images she saw in her dreams, shadowy figures and distorted faces. Her art, while hauntingly beautiful, conveyed a deep sense of dread. One evening, Jack stumbled upon a hidden door in the cellar, partially concealed behind a wall of old crates. The door led to a series of dark labyrinthine tunnels beneath the manor. Although frightened, Jack's curiosity drove him to explore these passages, discovering old, dusty rooms filled with arcane symbols and unsettling artifacts. Rebecca's research revealed more disturbing information. She learned that Blackwood Manor had once belonged to the Blackwood family, who were rumored to be involved in dark rituals and forbidden practices. The family had vanished mysteriously, leaving behind only whispers of their dark deeds. The eerie occurrences at Blackwood Manor grew more intense. The family's sleep was regularly disturbed by disembodied whispers and ghostly apparitions. The atmosphere in the mansion became increasingly oppressive, with cold spots and sudden gusts of wind appearing without cause. Anna's dreams became more vivid and disturbing. She began to see visions of a shadowy figure, a woman dressed in black, who seemed to be trying to communicate with her. The figure's presence was accompanied by a chilling sense of sorrow and despair. David's skepticism began to waver as he experienced unexplainable phenomena himself. He saw shadowy figures in the corners of his vision and felt an overwhelming sense of dread. His logical mind struggled to reconcile these experiences with the house's physical condition. Rebecca, driven by her investigative instincts, delved into the manor's archives. She discovered a diary belonging to a member of the Blackwood family. The diary detailed the family's descent into madness and the malevolent force they had invoked through their occult practices. The family's interactions with the supernatural escalated. Objects flew across rooms, and the once faint whispers became loud and insistent. The presence in the manor seemed to grow stronger, feeding off their fear and distress. Rebecca's research revealed that the Blackwood family had performed a ritual to summon a powerful entity, hoping to gain immortality and power. The ritual, however, had gone horribly wrong, binding the entity to the manor and dooming future occupants to its torment. Determined to put an end to the malevolent presence, Rebecca, David, and Anna decided to perform a counter-ritual to banish the entity. They gathered the items necessary for the ritual based on the instructions found in the diary. As they prepared for the ritual, the mansion seemed to resist their efforts. The entity's presence manifested more violently, causing the walls to shake and the temperature to plummet. The oppressive atmosphere became nearly unbearable as the entity's power grew. Anna, who had been most affected by the entity's influence, experienced a harrowing vision during the ritual. The vision revealed the true nature of the entity, a malevolent spirit of a woman who had been betrayed and sacrificed by the Blackwood family. Her spirit was trapped in a cycle of rage and sorrow. Despite the mounting terror, the family pressed on with the ritual. They recited the incantations and performed the necessary actions to expel the entity. The manor was filled with a cacophony of anguished screams and shifting shadows as the entity fought back. The final confrontation with the entity was a battle of wills. The mansion was engulfed in darkness, and the entity's form became a nightmarish amalgamation of shadows and distorted faces. The oppressive force seemed to sap the family's strength, but they continued with the ritual, driven by their determination to free themselves and the entity's tormented spirit. David, although physically and emotionally drained, played a crucial role in reinforcing the protective barriers. His knowledge of the manor's structure helped to stabilize the ritual's components and ensure that they remained effective. Rebecca and Anna, guided by the diary's instructions, channeled their combined willpower to confront the entity. They recited the final incantations, focusing their thoughts on dispelling the malevolent force and freeing the trapped spirit. As the ritual reached its climax, the entity's form began to disintegrate. The mansion trembled violently, and the air was filled with a deafening roar as the entity was pulled back into the void. The darkness lifted, and the oppressive atmosphere gradually dissipated. With the entity banished, the atmosphere of Blackwood Manor changed. The mansion was no longer a place of fear and despair. The family, though exhausted and scarred by their ordeal, felt a sense of relief and closure. Rebecca completed her research and documented their experiences, ensuring that the story of Blackwood Manor would be remembered. The manor was restored to a state of peace, and the dark rituals and artifacts were carefully removed and secured. The Caldwell family decided to make Blackwood Manor their permanent home. They found solace in their new beginning and in the knowledge that they had confronted and overcome a profound evil. The story of Blackwood Manor became a legend in the surrounding area, a tale of courage and endurance against the forces of darkness. The mansion, though still bearing the echoes of its past, stood as a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of family bonds. Years later, Blackwood Manor was a symbol of resilience and hope. The family's experience became a part of local folklore, a reminder of the trials they had faced and the triumphs they had achieved. The mansion, with its rich history and haunting past, continued to captivate and inspire those who heard its story. Evelyn Gray had long been fascinated by legends of cursed places and dark folklore. When she came across a mention of Hollow Creek, a village said to be abandoned under mysterious circumstances, her curiosity was piqued. The village was reputedly cursed, with locals disappearing or fleeing in terror. Arriving at Hollow Creek on a foggy afternoon, the Gray family was struck by the village's eerie silence. The streets were lined with dilapidated houses, their windows dark and empty. The dense forest surrounding the village seemed to close in, casting long, foreboding shadows. The family set up camp in one of the less decrepit houses, trying to make it as comfortable as possible despite its decrepit state. Evelyn was excited to begin her research, while Mark focused on ensuring their safety and stability in the unusual environment. Sophie and Liam, although intrigued, felt a growing sense of unease. As night fell, the village's oppressive atmosphere became more pronounced. Strange noises echoed through the empty streets, and an inexplicable chill settled over the area. The Gray family tried to ignore the growing discomfort, attributing it to the village's abandoned state. Evelyn began her investigation by exploring the village's old library, where she found records and journals detailing the village's history. The documents spoke of a dark legend. Hollow Creek was once home to a group of settlers who practiced forbidden rituals in a desperate bid to ensure their prosperity. According to the lore, the settlers had summoned a powerful entity, hoping to gain favor and wealth. Instead, they invoked a curse that brought doom upon the village. The entity, bound to the village by the ritual, was said to prey upon the souls of anyone who entered. As Evelyn pored over the documents, Mark noticed odd occurrences around their temporary home. Items moved on their own, and strange cold spots appeared. He tried to dismiss these as products of the old building's instability, but couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. Sophie, exploring with her camera, captured eerie images of shadows and unexplained figures in her photographs. Liam, drawn to an old abandoned well in the village square, reported feeling a strange force pulling him towards it. Despite his fear, he couldn't resist the pull of the well. The family's exploration revealed symbols and markings scattered throughout the village, hinting at the rituals performed by the settlers. The symbols were etched into the ground and on various buildings, forming a disturbing pattern that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The Gray family's experience in Hollow Creek grew increasingly unsettling. Nightmares plagued their sleep, and the village seemed to come alive with an oppressive energy. Shadows moved with unnatural fluidity, and whispers echoed through the empty streets. Sophie's photographs revealed more disturbing images, figures with distorted faces and eyes full of anguish. Her camera seemed to capture scenes that were invisible to the naked eye, adding to the mounting sense of terror. One night, the family was jolted awake by a series of loud, unexplained noises. The walls of their temporary home seemed to tremble, and an otherworldly force seemed to press against their senses. Mark, determined to protect his family, searched for the source of the disturbances but found nothing tangible. Evelyn's research led her to uncover more about the curse. The settlers had made a pact with the entity, offering their souls in exchange for prosperity. The entity, however, had betrayed them, binding them to the village and cursing anyone who dared to enter. As the family delved deeper into the village, they discovered a hidden chamber beneath the old church. The chamber was filled with sacrificial relics and an altar stained with dark ancient symbols. It became clear that the entity's influence was tied to this chamber, and the curse was still active. Determined to break the curse, Evelyn and Mark prepared to confront the entity. They gathered the necessary items and performed a ritual based on the instructions found in the village's records. The ritual was intended to dispel the malevolent force and free the souls bound by the curse. The atmosphere in Hollow Creek became increasingly hostile. The entity's presence was felt more intensely, manifesting as a dark, writhing mass that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The village's oppressive atmosphere grew even more pronounced as the entity's power intensified. The ritual began, and the family was met with violent resistance. The entity's form shifted and twisted, its presence overwhelming. Shadows surged around them and the air was filled with anguished screams. The village seemed to fight back, with the ground shaking and buildings creaking ominously. Anna, guided by the ancient texts, played a crucial role in the ritual. Her sensitivity to the supernatural allowed her to interact with the entity in ways her parents could not. She channeled her energy to weaken the entity's hold, using her fear and determination to fuel the ritual. Despite the entity's fierce opposition, the family pressed on. They recited the incantations with unwavering resolve, focusing on dispelling the malevolent force and breaking the curse. The battle reached a climax as the entity's form began to dissipate, and the oppressive atmosphere gradually lifted. With the entity banished and the curse lifted, the village of Hollow Creek was freed from its dark past. The once foreboding atmosphere lightened, and the oppressive energy that had pervaded the village dissipated. The Gray family, though exhausted, felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. Evelyn documented their experiences and the history of Hollow Creek, ensuring that the story of the village's curse and the entity's defeat would be remembered. The village was left in a state of peace, with the remnants of the dark rituals carefully removed and the chamber sealed. The Gray family decided to leave Hollow Creek, their ordeal having left them forever changed. They carried with them a deep respect for the power of folklore and the strength of their own bonds. Their experience had been a test of courage and resilience, and they emerged from it with a renewed sense of unity. Years later, Hollow Creek became a symbol of redemption and hope. The village, though still bearing the scars of its dark past, was now a place of tranquility. The tale of the Gray family's encounter with the entity became a local legend, a story of bravery and the triumph of light over darkness. The village's history and the family's story continued to captivate and inspire those who heard it. Hollow Creek, with its rich and haunting past, stood as a reminder of the enduring strength of the human spirit and the power of confronting one's fears.